Alright, so round one of this 5-round league. We're just going to go in order. Um, so I played this version in one league. And we are on the draw for round one. And I keep this hand because it has the Ether Vial on turn one, and because we could just basically curve 1-drop creature, 2-drop creature. And if we need to, we can cast the Ballista on turn two for one to kill like a Dark Confidant or anything like that. And since we're on the draw, we have time to draw into a blue land. If we draw into any land, we can sack the Field of Ruin to target their land to get an island, which will allow us to cast our Serum Visions. So we just kind of have our early setup cards, and we're just looking to draw like 3-drops and 4-drops after this point. Urborg into Thoughtseize. Uh-oh. Well, he took our Vial. So things could get a little awkward now. Oh, 8-rack. Alright. So we don't play Ballista against this deck. We'd rather just have it in our hand. Oh, that's convenient. Discard our artifact. It was a smart play. Well, we don't have blue yet, but we can sack to kill their Mutavault, which is pretty good. And we found Mausoleum Wanderer and Island. We put them both on the bottom, so I don't think either of those are particularly effective here. Thoughtseize us. Well, don't have any mana untapped. Now we drew the Architect. That's pretty good. We're still not going to cast it because we'd rather leave mana up for our Spell Starter Sprite. And since they didn't cast anything on their turn, we are just going to Field of Ruin them to kill their Urborg. And the reason we're doing this isn't because, oh no, we got to get rid of Urborg, like whatever, they have black mana. It's so that we actually get our third blue mana. So then potentially we can cast a Grand Architect and a Wanderer, something like that. So it's kind of whatever. I mean, I guess if they draw back-to-back Mutavaults, we would regret it. But I don't plan on playing any more lands this game because we're under the rack. So I feel like having a third blue is where we want to be. So we sack the Field of Ruin, kill their Urborg, draw another land, don't play it because we're under the rack. Keep mana up for the Spell Stutter up. No, that's kind of unfortunate. It's pretty good. Discard a land. Don't need that. Play Spell Stutter on your end step just to get things going. So we double Spell Stutter, take one from the rack, play the Grand Architect, then attack Liliana for 4 to kill her. Do you have something? Oh, you have the Dismember. Okay, so Liliana goes to 2. Might as well play the Wanderer, which, I mean, if we had played the Wanderer first, and then we had played the Architect, I think things would have worked out a lot better for us. So we play, end step we played the 2 sprites, and on our turn if we play the Wanderer, they would have to make a decision. Do I want to dismember one of the Spell Starter sprites in response, or do I just let things be? If they kill a Spell Starter in response, then we play the Architect, and we still get in for 2 damage on the Liliana to put her to 2, but instead of having 2 Spell Starter sprites, we have a Spell Starter and an Architect, which I think is a way better spot to be in. So they'll probably just let the Wanderer resolve in that spot. And then we cast the Architect, and they're like, uh-oh. Now if I dismember the Architect, then you just sack the Wanderer to save it. And so then the Spell Starter sprites get into Liliana to kill her that turn. And so then they would basically just have to untap and then cast the Dismember on the Architect in order to play around the Wanderer. So I definitely played that in the wrong order. I should have played the Wanderer before I played the Architect. I wasn't thinking Dismember for some reason, but I mean, it could have been Fatal Push too. So, like, either way, I should have played the Wanderer first. Things would have worked out better for us. But it didn't. That was our thinking, though. Say Raven's Crime, get our last card, take some damage from the rack, attack you for 2, put you to 10. Not playing the land because I'd rather just not take damage. Has us discarded, okay, whatever. Oh, that was pretty good. Attack for 2, down to 8. Definitely playing this Ballista because we're ahead in the race. And then On our turn, we would add a third counter to the ballista, attack for 3, 4, 5, put the opponent down to 3, and then we could remove all 3 counters to shoot them for the last 3 points of damage. And we would only take 3 from the rack, so we'd be at 10 and they'd be at 0, so they conceded. So we made that one misstep with the Architect. We should have played the Wanderer before the Architect, and we kind of got punished, but we were able to take out the Liliana the following turn. Or actually, they saw the writing was on the wall for Liliana, that she was dying next turn, so they just minused her to kill the sprite anyway. But we would have been in a better spot if we didn't do that. So let's see our sideboard for this matchup. I took out the 2 Smuggler's Copters because, well, we don't really need to be filtering through our cards. They're just going to have us discard them anyway. So it doesn't really matter that we have cards in our hand that we don't need. We'd rather have a threat that is a threat itself instead of a threat that requires to get crewed. And then I just took out 2 Serum Visions because I wanted to make room for 4 cards. The 4th Trinket Mage, the Chalice of the Void, because Chalice for 1 seems really good in this matchup. Pithing Needle, so that we can name Liliana, and also a Basilisk Collar. Even though they didn't show us any creatures other than Mutavault that can make Basilisk Collar effective, I think just gaining life is a way to get out from underneath a rack. So they have the rack and the Shrieking Affliction, so they're trying to basically empty our hand and deal 6 points a turn if they have 1 of each on the battlefield. But if we have a creature that's attacking, let's say a Vendilion Click or whatever creature we have, then we're going to be gaining life off of the Basilisk Collar. So it'll essentially negate a rack. And if we have the Engineered Explosives in, I would just cut like maybe a Mausoleum Wanderer to make room for the explosives. Maybe even Vial. Like it might be correct to cut a couple of Vials, but I figure Vial is probably a little better than the Wanderer. So that's basically how I sideboard. Go to game 2 on the draw. So this hand, it's like, it does have the turn 1 Vial, but it's kind of clunky. It has 4-drop, 3-drop, 3-drop. Like I'm inclined to keep it, but I don't know. And the opponent actually chose to draw first, which something I forgot that the rack deck does sometimes do. So since we're on the play, which if I paid attention, we have this highlighted area. On the play, this hand is a lot better, because if they play like an Inquisition or a Thoughtseize on us on their turn 1 and take our Vial, this hand is pretty bad. But on our turn 1, since we're on the play, we get to get the Vial out there before they can do that. So that's why we kept this hand. And unless they boarded in Needle, they're not going to have any answer to their Vial in a mono black deck. Funeral Charm us, have us discard a card. Might as well discard an extra click. Alright, Raven's Crime, have us discard a card. Probably not get into this 4-drop. Alright, well, let's discard Ballista. Let's put the Wanderer on the board. Increase. Not going to play the second Vial. Raven's Crime, discard the Vial. The Rack. Alright, well, under the clock. Oh no, we're really under the clock. This is going to be a tough one to come back from. Trinket Mage, that's a good one. So let's see what we get. We get the Chalice. So, because they already have the Raven's Crime in the graveyard. So presumably they're going to draw more lands or more discard spells. If they draw discard spells, well, okay, they're going to target us with discard spells. But a lot of those discard spells cost 1. But what is more likely the case is they draw some lands and retrace the Raven's Crime to keep our hand empty, so then we just die in a couple turns to the Rack and the Shrieking Affliction. Since this will deal us 3, and this one will deal us 2 to 3 damage depending on if we have 1 or 0 in hand, which really only gives us about 3 turns, and we're not going to deal 19 to the opponent in 3 turns. So I could have gotten something like Basilisk Collar to try to hook it up to the Trinket Mage, but that's trading 5 damage for 2 damage and getting 2 of it back. So we're still losing that race, especially when they have a Mutavault they could trade for the Trinket Mage anyway. So I feel like Chalice is really our hope to win this game. So we Trinket Mage for the Chalice. We play the Chalice for 1, so then that takes away a lot of their discard spells, takes away the possibility of any more Racks or Shrieking Afflictions, and most importantly takes away their ability to retrace the Raven's Crime. So then we could just sit behind some cards in hand, and so then we can stop taking damage from the Rack and the Shrieking Affliction um, in a few turns. So this is kind of I don't really like my spot here, but I think it's close now. I think without that Trinket Mage getting the Chalice, I think we're just pretty dead pretty quickly. But with it, I think that we have a game. So they draw another Mutavault. It's pretty good. Definitely want to trade off here because we're on the back foot, not them. Draw a Needle, not going to help us. Click ourselves because, well, this Needle gets countered by the Chalice. All right, that's an answer to Mutavault, and that's another answer to if they draw another Mutavault. And they did draw back-to-back Mutavaults. So we're underneath 1. So we got out from under the rack to some extent. We're at 5. Now Shrieking Affliction, if the opponent has 1 or fewer cards in hand, they take 3. So we can Spreading Seas the other Mutavault. And so now it replaces itself. We have 2 cards in hand. So if we don't play anything, we don't take damage from the Shrieking Affliction. We only take 1 from the rack. So now, as long as we keep these 2 cards in hand, we're only taking 1 a turn from the rack. And if we draw a card next turn and keep that in our hand, then we have 3 in hand. We're taking no damage from the rack or the Shrieking Affliction. And now we have 4 power worth of attackers, and we have both of their attackers neutralized by Spreading Seas. So we actually had a few pretty solid draw steps there to combat their really strong start. And we're actually out from underneath both of them, and we're really low on life, but we are still alive. And this Chalice for 1 now is going to negate half their draw steps. And now we have 4 points a turn. That means they're on like a 4 or 5 turn clock. And we did draw Basilisk Collar, not that that matters. It's countered by Chalice. This attack goes to 9. Just leave the cards in hand. So we take 0 on our upkeep. Draw a Field of Ruin, attack for 4, go to 5. Just pass again because now I just want a Spell Starter Sprite because we can counter a 2-mana spell because we have a Vendilion Click. So if they, you know, I don't know, I'm not really sure what they could do at this point, but if they do something to try to stop our attackers, we just Spell Starter Sprite it. We're not taking any damage from either of these things. There's no hurry for us to cast any spells. And if we just get 1 more attack in, then they go to 1. And, you know, if we Spell Stutter it, then we have 5 points of attack, and then we could still just Ballista for 1, even just with what's on board. So there's no reason to commit anything at this point. So yeah, that was it looked pretty bad when we had 1 card in hand against a Shrieking Affliction and a Rack. The opponent on 19 with a Mutavault, and we're on 15, about to take 5 a turn for the next few turns. And couple of Spreading Seas and a Trinket Mage into Chalice for 1 really turned this game around. And not sure what those last 4 cards in hand were, but I'm willing to imagine they were lands and 1-mana spells because they have the mana to cast pretty much anything else in their deck, and they didn't cast anything. So I'm guessing that Chalice did quite a bit of work. So yeah, that was a pretty good game, pretty good match.